Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks for starting your Thursday with us. We are going to begin in Washington, where President Trump has made good on his promise to sign the bill that forces the Justice Department to release documents related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
The president announced on social media last night he signed the measure into law. That signature coming just a day after Congress overwhelmingly voted in favor of releasing the Epstein files. Now, the bill requires Attorney General Pam Bondi to release all unclassified records related to Epstein within 30 days. Just last week, Bondi agreed to President Trump's request for the DOJ to investigate Epstein's connections specifically to Democrats. The White House has been feeling the pressure in recent days. On Tuesday, Epstein survivors spoke out ahead of the House vote on releasing the files. They were joined by a Democratic representative and 2 Republicans. That was symbolic of the rare bipartisanship we have seen over this issue. Congressional leaders reacted last night to the president signing the bill into law.
I said for a long time that I had concerns about some very serious flaws in the bill. We passed it to the House with a large margin, and I hoped that the Senate would address those concerns. They went a different direction. That's their prerogative. But, I was disappointed by that. But I'm glad that Congress has acted.
It's a big victory for the survivors, a big victory for transparency, and a big victory for the American people.
NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor joins us from Washington with more. Yamiche, good morning. So the president announced he signed the Epstein bill on social media rather than holding a public event, which he has done with other bills in the past. He once again made digs at Democrats, continuing to call the scandal a hoax. So what can we expect over the next 30 days, the timeline for the Justice Department to release these files?
Well, good morning, Joe and Savannah. The big question that you're asking is really the key question here. We know now, of course, that this bill has been signed by President Trump, but it's just not clear what the Department of Justice will actually release now. They have 30 days to make this decision, but we could see the Department of Justice go in a number of different directions. We know that the president has directed the DOJ to go after and investigate Democrats' connections to Jeffrey Epstein, even though the Epstein estate and all of those documents that we saw released last week, they mentioned both Democrats and Republicans. But it's going to be very interesting to see whether or not the DOJ leans on that investigation as a way to maybe not release some of the files. There's also this idea that maybe the Department of Justice will say, well, we're going to need more time because we need to go through these files. Attorney General Pam Bondi has been very clear that she believes, one, that she has new information that led to this investigation of Democrats, but 2, that also she wants to maintain transparency and protect victims. What that actually means could mean we could get pages and pages of redacted information, or we could end up having a situation where the Department of Justice really does come out with some robust files. I think it's going to be very interesting to see. One of the biggest things that people, especially supporters of the president, Republicans who are pushing for these files, they wanted to see a client list. They wanted to see who could be other people that possibly could be charged with sex trafficking, given the fact that Jeffrey Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell were really the 2 people that were charged in this case. But so far, Pam Bondi has said there actually isn't a client list, even though earlier in the year she said that there was a client list. So that's really caused a lot of confusion here. So we'll definitely be watching this closely to see what actually happens.
Now, Yamiche, despite the fact the bill has been signed into law, there is a lot of skepticism from some surrounding the release of these files, or concerns that a lot of the information will be redacted. Some might not come out at all. Walk us through some of the scenarios that would keep some or all of this information out of the public eye.
Well, there are a lot of scenarios that could happen. One, you could have Pam Bondi say, look, we can't release these right now because we're on a new investigation where we're investigating Democrats' connections to Jeffrey Epstein, as President Trump pushed for very publicly. So that's one thing. They could literally just say, we're not going to be able to release these files now. You could also have a situation where Democrats have warned about this. They say they don't want the president handpicking which files could be released to try to make Democrats look bad while also protecting himself and maybe other Republicans. So there is a scenario possibly, I'm not to say that this is going to happen, but there is a scenario where possibly President Trump and the DOJ look at these files together and decide hand by hand what they want to release to try to hurt his political enemies. And then there's this situation where maybe this all goes in a way that lawmakers really wanted to go, and the DOJ is as transparent as it can be while still maybe redacting names from victims and maybe people who are in some ways influential people whose names could be part of this, but who they redact because they've not been charged charged with a crime. So there are a number of scenarios here. I think the biggest question is going to be this client list again, because a lot of people are pushing to see, well, who else was involved in Jeffrey Epstein? What other high-profile people were involved? We know Bill Clinton was named in the Jeffrey Epstein files, though he has said over and over again he didn't do anything wrong. He didn't break any laws and hasn't been charged with anything. President Trump has been named as well. Same thing. He's saying he hasn't done anything wrong, and he has not faced any charges related to any sort of criminal activity connected to Jeffrey Epstein.
Yamiche, another topic we want to quick.
We're going to have to see what happens Friday. This hopefully will happen on camera because that's what us White House reporters are hoping for. I think it's going to be very interesting to see these two men in a room interacting. The president says it was now the mayor-elect who asked for this meeting. So it's going to be very interesting to see what the mayor-elect says, because now he's not a political candidate. Now he's someone who has to run a city. He has to be someone who has to really guarantee that it's funded and that it's not cut off from the federal government. So here it's going to be very interesting to see how he does that.
We'll see what happens. Yamiche, thank you so much.
Well, meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, two House lawmakers from Florida are facing questions this morning after being accused of ethics violations. A federal grand jury indicted Democratic Congresswoman Sheila Sherfulis McCormick on fraud charges yesterday for allegedly stealing millions in pandemic relief funds.
That comes as the House Ethics Committee says it is launching a separate investigation into accusations against Republican Congressman Corey Mills. The House punted an effort to censure Mills last night, instead voting to refer the matter to that Ethics Committee. He's facing various allegations, from accusations of misconduct against women to violating House rules.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Melanie Zanona joins us now with more on all this. Mel, good morning. So let's start there with what I mentioned. Congresswoman Sherfulis McCormick, she's facing potentially decades behind bars if she's convicted on some of these charges. What can you tell us about what she is accused of doing with this disaster relief aid?
Yeah, good morning, guys. What a bombshell indictment this was. The Congresswoman is being charged with stealing $5 million worth of FEMA funds and then funneling it to her own campaign and self-enrichment. According to this indictment, her and her brother had a family health care company in Florida. And then in 2021, this was during the pandemic, they received a staffing contract from FEMA related to delivering vaccinations in the area. But at some point, they were overpaid to the tune of $5 million. And then, according to this indictment, they are being accused, her and her brother, of conspiring to steal that money and conceal its origins. Now, the Congresswoman has maintained her innocence through a lawyer. An attorney says Congresswoman is committed public servant who is dedicated to her constituents. We will fight to clear her good name. And meanwhile, though, members of Congress, they are not waiting to see what happens in court. There is already a House Republican who is vowing to bring what is known as a censure resolution to the floor, potentially as early as today, as a form of sort of reprimanding formal punishment in the House. So we'll see.
Republican Congresswoman Nancy Mace, she's pushing to strip him of his committee assignments through this effort to censure him. What do we know about the accusations he's facing and how he's responding? And why did the House decide to let the Ethics Committee now deal with this?
Mills has had a string of requested against Corey Mills, accusing him of blackmail, harassment, and threats of revenge porn. And then earlier this year, there was another incident, a domestic dispute with a romantic partner. The congressman is married, but it was not his wife, who called the cops. The cops did show up to the apartment. They eventually investigated, decided not to bring any. Corey Mills said on the House floor yesterday.
I think it's very clear that the actual committee of jurisdiction is, in fact, the Ethics Committee, and cooperating with them is my top priority. I believe in all the accusations and false things that are being said will be proven to be absolutely false in many ways, and I have the evidence and receipts and look forward to working with them.
So now it's really in the hands of the House Ethics Committee, which in the past hasn't really had a lot of traction. But as you remember, George Santos, their investigation into George Santos, that is what ultimately led to his expulsion. So they could potentially have some real teeth here.
Mel, one more thing we want to ask you about before we let you go. There's this clash that we've been following between the Republican leaders, actually, in both chambers of Congress. Last night, the House unanimously repealed a provision that was tucked into the recent bill that ended the government shutdown. It would have given senators, not House members, the ability to sue the Justice Department for up to $500,000 if their phone records were seized without their knowledge. What is the backstory on this? Where does that go next?
So during the deal to reopen the government, this was quietly slipped in at the Senate's behest because there were some Republican senators who did have their phone records obtained in the Arctic Frost investigation. That is the investigation that was done into January 6th under the Biden administration. And so the reasoning here was that they wanted to give members some legal recourse. That being said, the House was completely blindsided by that provision. And so Republicans over there, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, were furious that this was included. They did vote to reopen the government. They didn't want to hold up, funding the government after that many days over this issue. So they repealed it on a standalone. The question, though, is whether the Senate is going to take it up. So far, Senate GOP leader John Thune, he's standing by that provision, has been very noncommittal about taking up this bill.
All right, Mel, thank you so much.
The Justice Department's embattled case against former FBI Director James Comey is now facing another major hurdle.
During a court hearing yesterday, the DOJ admitted that not every member of the grand jury saw the final version of the indictment. The error could potentially lead to the case getting tossed out. Comey is accused of making a false statement to Congress, as well as obstruction of a congressional proceeding related to a hearing in 2020. He's pleaded not guilty.
NBC News legal affairs reporter Gary Grumbach joins us now with more on this. Gary, good morning. So a lot of moving parts here. As we previously reported, a federal judge warned that prosecutors' handling of the case raised questions about misconduct surrounding grand jury materials. Another judge raised questions just about the acting U.S. attorney who's prosecuting this case. Walk us through what happened in court yesterday, and from a legal standpoint, how big of an error is this for prosecutors to admit to?
These are federal prosecutors trying to criminally charge a former FBI director. You'd imagine they want things as by the book and as buttoned up as possible, and that's simply not what happened here by the DOJ's own admission. What happened yesterday is that the DOJ described when the indictment came down and the grand jury decided to charge James Comey with 2 crimes, not a third, a grand jury coordinator edited the indictment to take out that third uncharged crime, so it would just be the 2 charged crimes. Then Lindsay Halligan, the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Virginia, signed that document. The jury foreperson signed that document, and it went to the judge. The entire grand jury never saw that finalized indictment, and that is a serious, serious problem for this case, guys.
Gary, Comey was in court for this hearing. His lawyer argued that the acting U.S. attorney's office was prosecuting him only because President Trump wanted him to be charged with something, this sort of like selective, vindictive prosecution. How much of a case do they have there?
Yeah, a former federal prosecutor has told NBC News that if there was ever a case for a selective and vindictive prosecution, and this is a rare thing to try to get done by a judge, this would be the case. They've talked about more than 200 times that the President Trump has essentially trashed James Comey on television, on Truth Social, calling him all kinds of names, saying that he should be criminally charged. And of course, days after he made that public post to Attorney General Pam Bondi, he was criminally charged. And so this is something that we hope to have a decision on by Thanksgiving. We do expect this to be appealed.
So, Gary, we know that Comey's lawyers are looking to dismiss this case with prejudice. That means it can't be brought for a second time. If that happens, could the Justice Department try him under any different circumstances? I mean, we know the statute of limitations is also an issue here.
Yeah, if it's dismissed with prejudice, they can't, but there's a lot of reasons why it may not be dismissed with prejudice. And one of them is this federal statute that allows for indictments to be rebrought if the statute of limitations has passed in a case. So there is a potential that James Comey is not entirely out of the woods yet, but there are 3 different reasons that we're waiting on for over the next week that this case may be dismissed and may not even ever get to trial in January. Guys.
All right. Gary, thank you so much.
All right. Well, the FBI is turning up the heat on a fugitive on their 10 most wanted list. A former Olympic snowboarder accused of running an international drug operation is now facing federal murder charges. Officials accuse Ryan Wedding of allegedly ordering a hit on a witness who is set to testify against him in a federal drug trafficking case. Well, now there's a $15 million reward for information that leads to his arrest or conviction. NBC News national correspondent Morgan Chesky has more.
A growing hunt for former Olympian Ryan Wedding. Authorities now offering $15 million for any tip that could capture the alleged drug kingpin.
Ryan Wedding is a modern-day iteration of Pablo Escobar. He's a modern-day iteration of El Chapo Guzman.
The former snowboarder facing new federal charges in the FBI's Operation Giant Slalom, accusing him of ordering the murder of a federal witness in Colombia, testifying on Wedding's alleged role running a massive transnational drug ring.
The witness was gunned down in a restaurant in Medellin before he could testify against Wedding.
The DOJ announcing 10 arrests in the murder plot, but say the 44-year-old remains at large in Mexico, protected by the powerful Sinaloa cartel, who authorities say he worked closely with to traffic an estimated 60 tons of cocaine from Mexico into Los Angeles each year.
It's killing our kids, it's killing our friends, it's killing our relatives. And this guy is responsible for a tremendous amount of that horror.
Canadian rider Ryan Wedding.
Wedding, who competed at the 2002 Winter Games for Canada, was added to the FBI's 10 Most Wanted last March. So far, federal authorities have indicted 35 suspects, seizing over 2,000 kilos of cocaine, $3 million in cryptocurrency, and $13 million in assets. The Attorney General says Mexican authorities are helping in their ongoing investigation.
Morgan Chesky, NBC News.
A strong line of severe storms is making its way across the southern part of the U.S. At least one person is missing in Arizona after fast-rising floodwaters spilled onto the road and washed a car away into a river. Rescue crews tried to save the man but could not reach him. The unoccupied car was located 2 miles downriver. And heavy rains are to blame for a partial roof collapse at a mall in Phoenix. Authorities say shoppers inside the mall were able to evacuate moments before the roof caved in. This is all part of that damaging system that caused severe flooding in California earlier this week. Now, meteorologists say more rain is on the way for L.A. and San Diego, which could see another inch of rain tonight.
For more on this line of storms, let's bring in our friend meteorologist Angie Lastman.
She's got your morning news now weather. Angie, good morning.
It helps to have a friend that knows the weather, doesn't it, guys?
Yeah,
I think especially...
I actually don't take advantage of it enough.
Well, call me anytime. We also are going to see kind of a couple of trouble spots when we gear up for that travel, of course, as we get into the weekend and even early next week. So I'll get to that here in a moment. But let's start at the beginning where we're at right now. We mentioned that we've got the flood concern across parts of the Southwest and Texas. And boy, is it an active morning already. You can see mostly just some showers across parts of the Southwest. We've got those thunderstorms, though, kind of ramping up this morning just to the west of Dallas and to the south and west of Kerrville. You can see some of that draped across parts of the Midwest, too. So an active morning and already concerned about flooding, specifically across Texas. You can see this flash flood warning that's in effect for the Dallas metro area. And we've got that bigger area included in the flood watch that stretches all the way back to the border. So this is the spot that we're most concerned about seeing some of that flooding occurring again today. And here's why. We've still got this Gulf moisture being dragged in ahead of this really kind of potent cold front. As it slides to the east, we're still going to see more of that moisture kind of ramp up the rainfall amounts. And then we start to finally see things winding down as we get into tomorrow for parts of the southern plains. But we shift all of that active weather across the Midwest and the mid-Atlantic. Now, we're not looking at widespread flooding for this region, but you can see this could cause some travel trouble. This will interrupt those outdoor plans if you have them. And we could see a couple of thunderstorms across the southeast. Meanwhile, the flash flood risk today, mainly concerned about that moderate risk you see in that brighter pink Del Rio back to the west of Kerrville, specifically is where we'll watch for the greatest chance to see some of that flash flooding. Otherwise, a couple of inches of rain expected here as we get through at least tomorrow. And then we gear up for really what we're watching on the West Coast. So let's transition to the west where we've got another Pacific storm that's going to slide into California. This does bring more of that rain to Southern California, unfortunately. No flood alerts up right now, but we do have the potential for some moderate rain there. And we will watch for the potential for, of course, some flooding because of what we've dealt with over the past couple of days, guys. We've got that additional mountain snow that we'll see as well. So this will be something that we watch into at least the next couple of days. That'll eventually slide into the Southwest. Parts of that region will see more of the rain. And you get the picture. We're kind of in this active pattern.
Watery.
Yeah, a lot of moisture.
Right. Thanks, Angie.
Thank you. Well, as the president's immigration crackdown continues, Democrats are taking action that could allow civil rights claims to be brought against rogue government agents.
Earlier this week, lawmakers reintroduced legislation that would permit federal officials, including immigration agents, to be sued individually for alleged constitutional violations.
Here to discuss is NBC News senior Supreme Court reporter Lawrence Hurley. Lawrence, good morning. So help us understand what this bill would actually mean. Like, how might it apply to these sometimes violent interactions that we're seeing almost daily between immigration agencies and people on the street?
Right. So first, a quick history lesson, and that's after the Civil War, Congress passed this landmark civil rights law that allowed federal, state and local officials to be sued for constitutional violations. That includes police officers and any type of local official. But that law doesn't include explicitly any reference to federal officials, right? So this law that's being proposed in Congress would close what is seen as a loophole because up until now, except for some minor exceptions, it's been very difficult, if not impossible, to sue federal officials for constitutional violations individually, right? So this would be a huge deal if it happened because, as we've seen with the recent encounters, there are allegations all across the country of federal agents violating constitutional rights. So this would allow people to sue for things like excessive force, unlawful entry, and all kinds of other constitutional violations. So it'd be a big deal if it ever got into law.
Lawrence, as you know, this is not the first time lawmakers have tried to push this bill. Of course, Democrats aren't in the majority. So remind us what happened the last time they tried to introduce it, the challenges they're facing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tall order, right? For one, this is kind of a wonky issue that's mostly of interest to people like me at the moment until people are more broadly aware of it. But beyond that, of course, you've got a situation where the president has to sign a bill into law for it to happen. And in the past, presidents of both parties are not really that interested in signing a law that makes it easier to sue federal officials, including the people that work for them, right? And not just law enforcement agencies, but also officials higher up in the government. So there's a lot of headwinds there, not least the fact that the Democrats aren't in control of Congress right now.
Well, Lawrence, how has the Supreme Court ruled in previous cases throughout the years on this issue? Expand on that. And currently, what alternatives do people have when they feel their rights have been violated?
Yeah, so the reason why this is back in Congress is because the Supreme Court actually in a 1971 decision had said, yes, federal officials can be sued under this old civil rights law. But almost as soon as the court ruled that, it's been kind of rolling it back. And so the current court in the decision in 2022 almost kind of eviscerated the whole thing, which is why this is now back in Congress. And at the moment, it's actually really difficult for people to get any redress for these kinds of violations. You can basically sue the federal government itself, right? You can't sue the individual agents, and it's very difficult to win those cases. There are lots of exceptions, and you don't get a jury trial.
All right, Lawrence, thank you so much.
Friends and family of former Vice President Dick Cheney are gathering in Washington, D.C. this morning for his funeral. He died earlier this month from complications from pneumonia and cardiac and vascular disease. He was 84. More than 1,000 people are expected to attend today's services at Washington National Cathedral. That includes former President Joe Biden and all 4 living former vice presidents. Cheney's old boss, former President George W. Bush, will deliver the tribute to his 2-time VP. Cheney is widely considered one of the most influential vice presidents in U.S. history.
The files that broke the illusion. For years, Trump built his political power on the myth that he alone would expose corruption. He promised to uncover secrets, punish predators, dismantle elite networks, and shine light where others were scared to look. But the moment Congress forced the release of the Epstein files, that illusion cracked in full public view. Because for the first time, Trump wasn't the hunter. He was one of the men standing uncomfortably close to the shadows. Signing the bill to release the files was not a chartered act of transparency. It was a defensive move, a political corner he walked into after resisting disclosures for years. Trump tried to spin it as leadership. I'm the one releasing them. But Americans aren't blind. They can see the tremor beneath the triumphant language, the panic behind the forced smile. No president rushes toward documents that could reshape public memory of their private circles unless pressure has made retreat impossible. And that is the core. The Epstein files represent a rare moment where Trump cannot control the narrative. These documents don't respond to intimidation. They don't care about loyalty. They don't bend to political spin. They exist outside his performance. They expose more than the men in them. They expose the ecosystem that protected them. For years, Trump claimed he was fighting the system. But these files remind the public that he was always a beneficiary of it, never its enemy. What terrifies Trump isn't guilt, it's proximity. His name appears near names Americans associate with secrecy, predation, and privilege. He risks being remembered not as the man who drained the swamp, but as the man who socialized with its architects. And the public sees the irony. While survivors demanded justice, Trump gave theatrics. While Congress demanded transparency, Trump offered excuses. While documents mounted, Trump delayed. This is the first scandal he cannot attack into disappearance. He cannot insult his way through it. He cannot shout louder than the evidence. The Epstein files are a mirror, one Trump avoided for years because mirrors reveal what slogans hide. And now the country sees it too. The man who promised to expose darkness was always terrified of the light.